Hello everybody and welcome to this analysis of Nicholas Cummins' letter to the Duke of Wellington, a cry for help during the Great Irish Potato Famine. My name is Lucía Sánchez Bejerano and I work at the Universidad Europea del Atlántico in Santander. In this piece of work we will see a presentation to the letter to the Duke of Wellington, the context of the Irish famine, an analysis of Cummins' letter, and a set of comments regarding the following centuries and some conclusions. The Almighty indeed sent a potato blight, but the English created the famine. These were the powerful words of John Mitchell, an Irish nationalist activist who fought against the Irish famine, also known as the potato famine, a dark stain in Irish history. This text is a historical document consisting of a letter published in the London Times, the United Kingdom, on Christmas Eve, in 1846, which shows the desperation of the writer Mr. Nicholas Cummins, who implores for help in dealing with the disaster occurring in Ireland at that moment. In 1845, a ship coming from America arrived at Ireland bringing an infection caused by a fungus. This caused the loss of potato crops all over the country, the main sustenance of the population who worked the lands, which were majorly owned by the English aristocracy. As a result of the crops failing, Irish people had no possibility to pay taxes and debts, and they had to sell their livestock and belongings to be able to survive, with the hope that the following year they would get a successful harvest. However, the famine continued until 1849, 4 years, causing over 1 million deaths, and another million of people had to flee towards America or Britain. After Sir Robert Peel, British Prime Minister, resigned in 1846, Lord John Russell took charge of the position. He made Charles Trevelyan Assistant Secretary under Liberal Whig administration and take control of the policy regulating the famine. Trevelyan managed the crisis with an iron fist. He followed the laissez-faire practice, which consisted of not interfering under the argument that Irish people should become more independent and manage the situation on their own. Catholics, the most popular religion in the territory, had lost centuries ago the privilege of owning lands, speaking Gaelic, living inside the cities, receiving education or getting a profession, and therefore they were the poorest and the ones with the less resources. Furthermore, they could not get access to other crops such as wheat or corn, since they were sold to the Americans or sent back to Great Britain. As a result, Irish were starving to death up to the point they had to choose between keeping the house or eating the few healthy crops and being expelled from the lands on which they worked. Cummins, a magistrate of Cork who was holding the justice of peace of Unionists for Cork, experienced the devastated state of Ireland during the potato famine. Thus, he decided to take part, supplicating for assistance to the first Duke of Wellington, Arthur Wellesley, who had once been the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom in 1828 and therefore still had strong connections to the House of Lords and Queen Victoria I herself. Wellesley had an Irish origin and had even fought for the Catholic emancipation in 1829, so he made a perfect addressee for the cause. Even though the letter was addressed to him, it was also implicitly aimed at another public, since it was published specifically during the Nativity. It can be presumed it occurred in the attempt of making British people aware of the Irish tragedy while they were celebrating with joy, luxury and comfort the sacred holidays. In the end, only the British government had the possibility to help. Cummins had travelled to the town of Skibbereen for 3 days in the hope of contributing with a food handout. In this letter, he thoroughly describes from his own personal experience the atrocities the blight was causing to the inhabitants. They were suffering from hunger in its most calamitous and ravaging manner. He starts his letter very straightforward, announcing he will not ask for an apology and neither will he introduce a preface. There's no time to waste. The situation is urgent, and besides, he directly dares the audience since he has nothing else to lose. Therefore, there's no time for formalities, and he thinks he's allowed to speak frankly because he's right and true about what he's writing. Nonetheless, He acts intelligently, and soon enough he states the fact that the Duke of Wellington is an important and illustrious person. In this way, he maintains the balance between being demanding and respectful. In an attempt to remind Wellesley that he also originates from Ireland, Cummins speaks of his good relationship with the town he visits and how he tried to help bring in as much food as he could to the locals. Throughout his sentences, it is possible to already envisage the horror that he's about to describe, lamentable accounts. There's a strong use of extreme adjectives and a rich and extensive use of lexis, appalling state of misery to which the part of the country was reduced, for example. Nevertheless, even though it is obvious the effort he is making to relate the accounts, he affirms the difficulty of putting into words the images seen. No tongue or pen can convey the slightest idea, he says. He details absolutely everything about the hamlets, which seem to be dead and empty. For this, he even uses the expression wretched to refer to them. All along the description, we find these metaphors to make the reader evoke images in their mind. People no longer had the appearance of human beings. They were ghastly skeletons, phantoms, frightful specters. Cummins narrates how while he was entering the hovels, he found entire families all waiting for their death to come, not being able to move, not even to bury their corpses, which were rotting inside the houses. They all were half naked, in extreme poverty, covered just by some horse cloth, and they had left what they had left. The writer shares how hunger had led them to illness, which made them delirious and were moaning in pain, a memory he still had fixed in his brain. With this, he tries to make the receiver feel the sensation and grow a feeling of guilt and empathy. He knows it is not pleasant reading, but he sympathizes with the reader and adds, "My heart aches at the recital, but I must go on." Thus, if he can continue, the audience can also endure themselves to keep track of the text. He also adds, "Decency would forbid what follows, but it must be told," which means two things. First, that it is not appropriate or well-mannered to speak about these atrocities with such a raw portrait. Society in the moment would not allow it in a respectful and civilized conversation. And secondly, if there was any decency or goodness in the British government, that would not be happening, which means the politicians were not doing their job and they had no kindness or mercy at all. Manipulation is therefore extended throughout the letter. What is more, he then relates an encounter he had with a woman who, grabbing him from the back, asked for help with a just-born infant in her hands. The narration of the event, again made by using powerful meaning to make the reader involved with the description throng of pestilence. This way, he makes sure nobody feels indifferent, as it is impossible to feel disgusted by a baby, no matter his origin or religion. Afterwards, Cummins changes his chronicle and starts focusing on the already dead people. He talks about frozen bodies devoured by the rats, he says, and a mother covering the corpse of her 12-year-old daughter with stones. He relates as well a doctor finding a family who were agonizing beside the dead body of one of them, who could not have been moved away because of the lack of strength and life. Thereupon he launches a question: to what purpose should I multiply such cases? Here Cummins wants to justify the fact of himself developing so many details. He then states that he wants to make people have enough reasons to help. If this was not sufficient, he still uses biblical references to justify the good actions that will be judged in the doomsday, a belief all Protestants and Catholics share as Christians. Thus, British people are going against the religious teaching, and it will be on their conscience as there's no redemption for this negligence. However, Cummins acts smart again, and he seeks for the approval of the Duke by saying he knows Wellesley is an honourable person. By showing respect and flattering him, he knows he's already creating a bond which allows him to proceed convincingly. He dares to point out the fact that by providing help, the Duke will add some more recognition to his already well-known name. For this, we can see a strong imagery, He says, another star in that the brightest in your galaxy of glory. He compares his good deeds with an entire galaxy. So if he does not do it for the well-being of the people, he can do it for his own popularity. In order to finish the letter, Cummins summarizes his speech by imploring help, decreasing the level of demand he had along the discourse. In that way, he balances the register and adequation showing his just servant, and Wellesley is one with power enough to ask the Queen for help. He tries to sympathize, one more time reminding the Duke he has the gallant Irish blood which you have so often seen lavished to support the honour of the British name. If that is not enough, he adds that Wellesley could even add that endeavour to his tomb by engraving the words Servata Invernia, Ireland was preserved by me. After this happened, Ireland was ruined for many years. However, the impact of this letter and some other actions made by Russell, the British Prime Minister, opened soup kitchens in 1847 to help feed the starving population. Finally, things went slowly back to normal in the following decades. They even faced some other blights, but as they were prepared, consequences were not that dramatic. However, this situation created tensions between Irish and British, and a feeling of hatred towards the United Kingdom grew up to the point they had a war in the beginning of the 20th century. In 1921, Ireland got its independence except for a northern territory, and they eventually settled as the Republic of Ireland. Regarding the text, it has been wonderfully written both by the powerful language used in the circular structure, which makes clear the point of the author is reaching out. It is remarkable how the writer prepares the audience from the very beginning, how the writer also uses his attitude and narrates the events. It is also relevant to the psychological load this speech has. Cummins plays with the empathy and feelings and creates a Pygmalion effect on Wellesley by affirming he knows how decent and honourable he is. This way, Cummins influences the idea the Duke has on himself. This can be observed also in other famous speeches, such as the one given by Elizabeth I to her troops against the Spanish Armada. In my opinion, the United Kingdom looked for many excuses not to not get involved, and they let themselves be carried out by fear. The hate towards Catholics contributed to the isolation as well. The politics of laissez-faire were not appropriate for a nation that has not the tools for their own management. It was quite hypocritical to demand them to exploit their own resources for the United Kingdom and at the same time not assume responsibility when lands under British control were not being productive. The laissez-faire politics were not as open as they should have been, so that they worked. This text still has a lot of influence and relevance even nowadays, since we can extrapolate this situation to the disgraced lived in African countries and the closing borders and repatriation. History allows us to learn, that is, of course, if we are prepared to do so. Until then, these sorts of tragedies will keep repeating themselves. And with this, I finish this presentation. I hope that you enjoyed it and that it was useful. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.